I keep circling back because every summer I look forward to Sirius XM's playing of yacht rock.
Why don't you just create your own playlist?
I should. I know, because I'm lazy.
There's so many great. I mean, my favorite yacht rock song of all time, though, is one of the lesser known, although you probably know it.
I might know it.
Lahaina by Loggins and Messina.
Oh, are you kidding me? I know that song.
Yeah.
Speaking of Kenny Loggins,
yes,
I saw this amazing. I think it was a tweet by Richard Marx, and he's like, "I've been friends with
Chico Marx."
No, Richard Marx,
oh, sorry,
the musician.
Right.
He was saying, "I've been friends with Kenny Loggins for something like 30 or 35 years, and every time I go out to eat with him, the waiter asks if he needs anything else, and he says, 'I'm all right.'" The waiter walks away, and then I look at him and go, "Seriously?"
That's amazing.
That is incredible. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's Spoiler Piece Theater. We're the film podcast that doesn't give a shit about spoilers. We just want to talk about the movies. I'm Megan Kearns. I'm a freelance writer and film critic, editor of Bitchflix, and a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association.
My name is Dave Riddle. I write for Salt Lake City Weekly and Orlando Weekly, and I'm a member of BAFCA.
And my name is Evan Crean. I am editor for The Independent. I am co-chair of BAFCA and co-author of your 80s movie guide to better living.
Woo!
Yeah. Hey-o.
I don't know what's happening anymore.
Hey-o. We are punchy.
All right. So we are punchy. This week, we're going to be talking about the new Noah Baumbach film, Marriage Story. And Evan is going to regale us with his coverage from Montreal of the Montreal International Documentary Festival.
Yes.
A.K.A. Rencontres Internationales du Documentaire de Montreal.
Pretty good.
Thank you. I'd say Midland.
Yes, so regale
Come
us.
see, come sa.
We.
Regale, please.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I'm starting today. Yeah, so Rencontre Internationale du Documentaire de Montreal. RIDM.
Yeah.
That's right.
So, yes, this was my second year covering the festival. It was super exciting to go back. I was very excited they invited me to come back. And, yes, so it's kind of interesting when you show up to an international festival, particularly one that is, multilingual, especially when you don't realize that some of the first films are not in English and don't have English subtitles.
Whoops.
Like me. Three of the initial films that I watched were in other languages and had French subtitles. And, people who've listened to the show before know that I know French. I can't speak it very well. I understand a lot of it. But yes, it was certainly a challenge, but it was a fun challenge. Particularly in one of the films was, people were speaking Spanish, and so I was using Spanish to decode words in French that I wasn't familiar with in the subtitles.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
And I don't know Spanish, but I know words that are similar enough that I was like, okay, now I know what that word is. Cool. Now I know how to do
I speak Spanish.
It's funny. I took French for 5 years, and then I took Spanish for 3 years, and knowing French really did help my Spanish comprehension. So thank you, Romance Languages.
Yeah, gotta love the Romance Languages. Okay, I guess I'll start with some of my lesser favorites because I feel like I have less to say about them.
Oh, I love that we're going from, I was going to say worst to best.
Yeah,
but
basically.
Yeah.
I gotta talk about this movie I saw called Space Dogs.
I knew you were going to start with that one.
It's horrifying, genuinely horrifying.
Wait, well, hold on. I got to hear about this again because you told me about it last week, and I was like, gross.
And I was horrified when we heard about it that time.
This was a documentary. This was a film I almost walked out of. I was so horrified. I'm not going to get into a whole lot of details, but so the title is Space Dogs, and so you think, okay, this is going to be about the dogs that were in Russia's space program that they would use, and you're like, okay, it's not going to be, sunshine and rainbows, but you don't expect it to be as horrifying as this is, which is like okay, here's this idea, Laika was a stray dog in, a street dog, and they took her and they sent her into space, and, she died, of course. And they're like, oh, legend says that she returned to Earth as a ghost, and now, like, her spirit roams the streets with other street dogs. So this movie is literally just an excuse to watch street dogs and see what they do all the time.
Wait, that's the whole movie?
There's so little narration.
It's like an Andy Warhol movie.
There's so little narration. There's so little connection, really, to, like, the idea of space dogs, other than to show you, like, horrible archival footage of, like, hooking dogs up to tubes and things.
Yikes.
And I'm leaving it there. But, like, this has some of the most horrifying imagery I've ever seen on film. It's so disgusting. It just feels like a troll documentary. It's like, let's see how much we can shock people with, like, the thinnest excuse for existence.
That sounds gross.
Yeah, not a fan.
And you know what's interesting, thinking about, like, just following dogs? Like, that's essentially what the lovely cat documentary Keddy did, was just follow cats in Turkey. And it's beautiful and wonderful. So you can just follow animals and have it be lovely.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that it has to shy away from the difficult stuff, because I think, the next movie I'm going to talk about is called LOS REYES, which is a similar premise. It's about two dogs that live in this skate park in Chile. And the dogs just kind of roam around the park, and, like, you see people feed them and play with them. And they have, it's really interesting to see them kind of just live and be companions together. Like, one of the dogs loves to, like, bark and chase people that come into the park. And another dog just loves having things in its mouth, whether it be tennis balls or water bottles or rocks. It's funny, and you just, like, see the dog is, like, picking up this massive rock in its mouth because it's like, hey, look, a rock.
Aww.
So, like, that stuff can be kind of cute, but, like, you also see the horrors of, like, an animal living outdoors with nobody really taking care of it. In this case, like, people feed the dogs, and, like, people who work at the park set up houses for them so they can at least sleep and not have to be out in the rain. But it's really tough seeing animals not being cared for and conditions like that. It's not easy, but at least in this case, it was slightly easier to watch than space dogs.
I was hoping that you were saying that somebody was teaching the dogs, like, skate tricks. They're like, go earn your Tony Hawk accreditation. Accreditation? I don't know what the,
Credentials?
Go, yeah.
Street cred?
Yeah. Go get your your sponsorship. There you go.
Yeah, there we go. That works.
That's it. Good little bandana.
Slightly easier to watch, but I can say definitively to my mother-in-law, Ema, you should never watch either of these movies. You are banned from seeing either of them.
Yeah, that space dog sounds brutal.
We cannot any movies where animals or dogs die instantly on the movies my mother-in-law can't watch list.
Yeah, I'm with your mother-in-law on that one.
So let's talk about some more uplifting fare. I saw this other documentary, which was a little too experimental for my taste. I think you guys would probably say it's not an Evan movie. It's called In the Name of the Scheherazade, or The First Beergarden in Tehran.
Yeah, I was really intrigued by this title.
Yeah, it's a super weird, like, experimental documentary, and it looks really cool, and there's lots of really great animation in it. It's kind of like this meta story about...
I'm sorry, I don't like... There's so many documentaries now doing animation, it really pisses me off. Because it's like, we can't... Like, whereas it used to be, like, there would be... words on the screen, or we wouldn't even do this now. It's just like, let's get cool cutting edge animation and do this thing. It's like, fuck you.
It's
bullshit.
part of, like, this weird intercut storytelling. So, like, the premise of it is, like, there's this Iranian film student, and she's like making a film for her class, which she's kind of editing with the professor in real time. So it's like this idea where it's like, she's putting stuff in here and the professor's commenting in the background in places, and he's like, no, take that out, or no, stretch this part out, or do this or do that, which is like kind of a cool premise.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by this.
But it's a little too all over the place, and it's not long. It's like 75 minutes, and it's a very long 75 minutes. It's just a little too experimental for my taste. I think other people would possibly enjoy it, but it's a little too out there for me.
I like how the IMDb plot summary says, forget everything you think you know about storytelling.
By the way, I have to say about this plot summary, it was like 5 times the length of this. I shortened it.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's some interesting ideas. Like one of the storylines is about this Iranian woman in Germany who's a brewer, and she's like comes up with the idea of like, oh, let's make a beer garden in Tehran. Like, let's bring German beer culture to Tehran and see how that goes. But yeah,
I'd watch a documentary about that.
yeah,
Right? I
Yeah.
would too.
mm-hmm. That would be interesting if it was done in more of kind of a straight head. But whatever. Well, moving on. Now we're starting to get into the stuff that I thought was really good and was like, yeah. I guess I'll start with AMUSSU, which is it's a documentary from Morocco. It's kind of a really badass story. It's about this group of villagers, and they have like a I don't know what to call it, a reservoir or like their water supply essentially. And at a certain point, this like greedy silver mine was like siphoning water off of their water supply.
Ew.
And it was killing their crops and their oasis that they have there. And so they just were like, nah. And they just they just started a peaceful occupation of the water pipeline, and they cut off the silver mine's supply of water. And they just live there. And they protest through like poetry and song. And it's just like really incredible. It's just it's so moving. It's, this like really like grassroots activism, but people just being badass for just taking up their space and not, being pushed around, even though the local authorities like try to arrest and imprison some of them. Like they've been occupying this area since 2011, which I think is kind of amazing.
Wow, that is incredible. I'm sorry just to cut in. I have a question. Because you said that it's a Moroccan film. Are these Bedouin people by any chance?
I'm not sure.
Because I was going to say, I was curious because if I remember correctly, there's a huge cultural tradition of poetry and singing poetry in Bedouin cultures, I believe.
Could be. I mean, it does feel very, it feels very natural. Like their songs, their protests, and their poetry that they sing. It's really
sounds
cool.
beautiful.
It is a beautiful documentary. It's just an incredible story. And I'm just in such awe and admiration of these people who have very little, It's the kind of situation where they've got these, small stone, houses that some of them live in, and, there's no light or anything even in them. It's just really powerful story. I really, really thought it was good. The next one I'm going to talk about is called The Disappearance of My Mother, which is an Italian documentary.
Ooh, I like the title.
Yeah.
Yeah, this played, I think, at IFF.
I think so. I think it might have played at Sundance or I think it's played some bigger festivals.
No,
too.
it wasn't IFF. It was Boston Women's Film Festival. That's what it was. I knew I had seen it playing somewhere and was disappointed I didn't get to see it.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, so it's the director Beniamino Barisi. He follows around his mother, who Benedetta Barzini, who was a famous model, I think in the 60s. And then she just became like a teacher and a feminist icon for just kind of like not rejecting modeling, but like kind of rebelling against the idea of modeling and, having your photo taken and being directed and the male gaze, and like, she's just like a really interesting woman, and he's always just been kind of like in awe of her. So he kind of constructed a documentary that's like, he's always been kind of like sneaking and like, taking video and photos of her, and she's kind of like, I'm done. Like, I'm annoyed with this. Like, stop filming me all the time. And they described it after in the Q&A. It's really more of just kind of like a goof. Like, from the idea that like she's not actually offended that he has such admiration for her, but it's kind of like almost like a narrative device where she's like, I'm rejecting all of this, and I want to just have fun and go do my own thing. So that's kind of like the narrative structure of it. It's like him shooting her and her being like, no, go away, leave me alone. So it's kind of funny, and it's really sweet, and it's very much like a love letter to his mother and what she stands for, while also just being kind of like a sweet thing. And then towards the end, it's kind of like she's like, oh, you know, a lot of the films like her, like, oh, I'm packing up my stuff and I'm leaving and I'm gonna go off, and they show like different directions that she could have gone in. Like she like gets in a boat and it just starts like rowing into the ocean, or like she wanders off in the woods and is like doing her own thing. I don't know. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really entertaining and sweet and funny, very funny. Like she has a really like great sense of humor, and yeah, I dug it.
That's interesting that you talk about in the Q&A that the director reveals that, because that's one of the major criticisms I've read about this documentary is the fact that he's like violating his mother's consent and everything. So so I was like, oh, I need to see this. So it's so interesting that that's completely a, you know, device.
Oh, totally.
Device. So yeah.
Yeah, it was him and his mother were there for the Q&A, and they're like, no, it's not actually like a thing. She's like, yes, I do have this thing where I'm like, I reject the idea of like imagery, and like I hate the idea of like modeling, and I think they show her in the film like she still does some modeling. It's not like she is entirely disconnected from it, but she's like, yeah, it's kind of like I do have some of these beliefs, but like for the purposes of the film, it's kind of like a thing, you know, it's kind of a goof.
Yeah. Huh. Now I really want to see it.
That's like that the Dylan documentary that Martin Scorsese did, Rolling Thunder Review. There's like fake people in that.
Really?
Yeah, I was watching and being like, I remember I was watching and being like, this is all falling together a little, this one particular thing. And then I was like, all right, but whatever, maybe. And then I read about it, and it's like, yes, this person doesn't exist. They made him up for the documentary. And it's like, oh my God.
You called it.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
But there was also a bunch of other shit that I didn't catch on to that was also fake. So, and anyway, it just is kind of interesting how even documentaries will manipulate.
Yeah,
people think, "Ooh, it's reality."
No,
is it though?
It's not.
No.
It is completely even if it's taking some truth, it's completely fabricated.
Even if it's cinema verite.
That's right. Yeah. It's always the bias of the filmmaker. There's always a narrative that they're trying to construct. The director, editor. Yeah, always. So you gotta think critically about everything. Anyway,
that was the opening night film, and
it's quite an opening night film.
I was joking with people when I was there and when I came back about how lazy we are in the United States of only speaking one language, because it's like the documentary's in Italian, the Q&A was mostly in French, and you know the director and his mother were speaking French fluently, and then some people were asking questions in English too, and they were speaking in English, and I'm like, 3 languages right there.
That's amazing.
In this country, we're like, I don't want to learn 2 languages.
Do you want me to go off on Americans? Because I can. I mean,
I think we all can.
As an American.
Let me look at my watch.
Yeah.
So yeah, I found that amusing. So let's see what's left to cover. So 2 more, I think, here. There's Nomad, in the Footsteps of Bruce Chatwin, which is Werner Herzog's documentary.
Yes, I'm excited to hear about this one.
It is very entertaining. I love Werner Herzog.
Werner Herzog is the best.
I have to say, because it's happening right now, I love that Werner Herzog is crying over Baby Yoda from The Mandalorian.
No, I know what that is. I didn't know he was crying over it.
Yes, he's crying over Baby Yoda.
Oh, Baby Yoda, it is so the most adorable thing I've ever seen.
He cries over the puppet.
It exemplifies the loss of innocence and how we all are marching to our deaths.
That is amazing. Oh my God, he's amazing.
Yeah, he is amazing. And this documentary it's very sweet and it's sad, but it is funny. Like it's a documentary that he made about his friend Bruce Chatwin, who was an author and a traveler and a storyteller. He's kind of a roguish kind of character. He was he passed away from AIDS at the tail end of the 80s, and you find out that he was, married, but he was bisexual, and so he had relationships with men and women. And
yes, bisexual.
Werner Herzog had, were friends. They were friends, and they just had a very similar kind of adventurous spirit, and just like, I don't know, a zest for life, I guess. It is the best way to describe it, but this is Werner Herzog, so there's just hilarious things. Like, he's talking about some historical figure's house, and then it shows the house, and Werner Herzog's like, And then he built this phenomenally ugly house, and everyone in that auditorium just died. And it's
God, he's so funny.
like one of the chapters is called "Landscapes of the Soul," and you're just like, this is clearly Werner Herzog.
Clearly,
Only he can get away with things like voyages of the mind and lands. These are actual words that appear in the documentary: voyages of the mind, landscape of the soul.
I'm just thinking of Burden of Dreams. Have you seen that?
No, I haven't.
The one where he talks about the sounds of the jungle. The sound of the jungle is the sound of murder.
He really is amazing.
oh my God.
Oh, there's nobody
It's
like him.
incredible.
Yeah. So the documentary kind of revisited some passages from Bruce Chatwin's books and interviews people who knew him, like his wife and, other friends. And, it's got awesome interviews where Werner Herzog is like holding stuff up and, he's like in the shot and, he's very much like a part of the documentary. It's very much like a tribute to this, friend who he lost too soon, and just like, describing some of his films that he made, and some Werner Herzog describes some of his films and how Bruce interacted with them. Or when Bruce Chatwin died, he left Werner Herzog his rucksack that he carried with him everywhere. And Werner Herzog tells a story of when he was shooting a film, and I'm totally blanking on the name. It's like what is the name of it? It's like a mountain climbing movie. So there's this story about the rucksack that his friend gave him and how it saved his life. They were shooting a movie and they flew up by helicopter to the top of this mountain, and they got trapped up there for 2 days because there was a storm that's just suddenly descended, and him and the people that he was shooting with were trapped, like sitting in the snow for like 2 days straight.
Oh my God.
And how he was able to sit on the rucksack, and because of that, a lot of people are like, you survived because you had
he could sit on the rucksack.
Yeah.
Wow.
The dark glow of the mountains.
That's yeah.
Yeah.
It's an incredible story. So I don't know. It's funny. It's sweet. It's very heartfelt. And my God, does that guy know how to frame an interview subject? Just like really interesting backdrops and just like really cool settings for talking to people. I feel like that was striking to me in the film. So I think that brings us to the last film that I saw called, I'm gonna attempt this, nîpawistamâsowin, We Will Stand Up. And it's a documentary about Indigenous people in Canada, specifically looking at the story of Colton Bushy, who was an Indigenous, he was like a teenager, early 20s. He was murdered. He was killed in one of those stand your ground kind of scenarios where like he was on this farmer's land because he needed help for something. His tire was flat or something. And then the farmer shot and killed him.
Oh my God.
And like in a particularly brutal way, he like shot him in the back of the head, and they're like, this was murder.
Clearly.
And of course the guy got acquitted.
And it sounds arguably like a hate crime too.
Oh yeah, totally. So it's like an examination of that, of Colton Bushy's death and how his family handles it and how they use it as kind of a call to action in Canada to fight for the rights of Indigenous people. So it's like part kind of history lesson on, how Indigenous people are treated in Canada, part kind of like social activism film. And then also part of it is this, so Tasha Hubbard, the director, frames it from the perspective of being an Indigenous woman herself with 2 sons and like raising sons in this kind of environment.
Ooh.
And like teaching them about their history as a people, but then also like, how do you live and grow and be in this place that kind of treats you as a second-class citizen? Like, how do you deal with that? Mm-hmm. But also, how do you fight back against that? So it kind of like takes our personal experience and uses it as an opportunity to approach the subject, which I think is a really smart way to do it.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that sounds amazing.
And it's very moving. It's so frustrating to see this, poor family trying to fight for justice. And I mean, they even get to the point where like they meet with all the major ministers in the Canadian government. They even meet with Trudeau himself, and there's footage of them talking to Trudeau. But the government is all pretty much talk and no action. Like, they also go to visit the United Nations and ask the United Nations for like a special investigation into Indigenous rights in Canada. And the problem is that like the Canadian government actually has to invite the United Nations like representative in for the investigation to happen, and they haven't done that. So it's kind of like really frustrating because you're like, you give the appearance of listening, but you're not actually doing anything to help, because like one of their gripes is that in the trial, for the man who killed Colton was there were no Indigenous people on the jury. It was all white people on the jury, and because they were able to like use peremptory challenges in jury selection to just be like no to any Indigenous person who came up, and so the Canadian government's like, oh, we'll just get rid of peremptory challenges. That'll fix it.
Way to understand the problem.
Yeah, it's super frustrating.
I mean, I hate to say this because it's so like, jaded, but I'm not surprised considering considering our own country's treatment of Indigenous peoples, but especially in Canada. I mean, there's so many. I think it's up in like 100,000, maybe not that high, but maybe missing Indigenous women who've been just gone, missing, murdered. Nobody knows.
That's horrible.
Yeah, and it's been ongoing for such a long time, and Indigenous activists have talked about this and protested about this and tried to raise awareness, and there's still just not enough attention to this issue. So it's
kind of
horrible.
That's kind of what Wind River is about in a way.
Yes. Yeah. That is actually exactly why Taylor Sheridan.
Yeah.
That's exactly why he made the film, because he read about the missing and murdered Indigenous women, and he's like, I can't believe more people aren't talking about this. I need to do something. Right. And that's exactly why he made that film.
This feels like a similar scenario. It's like not enough people are talking about these issues, so we need to kind of take charge and share the story with people, and it's heartbreaking. It really is. It was actually, I think it was the last film that I saw at the festival, and it just, man, it really moved me. I felt so frustrated to the point of tears for this family. It's so tough to see something like that happen and not be able to feel like you do anything, even though you're doing everything you possibly can.
Mm-hmm. God, it's awful.
But yes, it's a great documentary.
The documentary does sound incredible. Wow. Sounds like you saw some incredible films.
I did. I was very grateful for the experience, and hopefully maybe again I can go next year and check it out.
Ooh.
And report back.
Third time's a charm.
Yeah.
Great.
Troisième time. Come on.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Thanks for keeping us
Troisième année.
on track, Dave.
Right. Exactly.
À l'année prochaine.
Prochaine is one of my favorite words. But you know what? One of my favorite word in French, my very favorite word is.
What is it?
It's not great, but the story behind it is great. Maybe avec, with.
Yeah.
Because one of my favorite Warner Brothers cartoons of all is, of course, a Pepe Le Pew, and there's one when. You know how the black cat always gets the white stripe painted down her back, and Pepe Le Pew thinks she's a skunk.
Right.
For some reason, I don't know why, some shopkeeper throws her into a store to go flush out Pepe Le Pew, and as he does, he screams, "Avec!" and then he throws her.
It's random.
Yeah.
That is random.
Yeah. So, but I mean, this is also the same cartoon where they're like, "Un femme skunk de pew," So.
Oh, that cartoon always creeped me out.
Oh, it's totally creepy.
So creepy.
I mean, he's supposed to be creepy. I mean,
he is.
Right.
That's one of the things is like, you're not really supposed to like Pepe Le Pew. You're supposed to feel bad for the girl cat.
And somehow I don't think that's the message a lot of people have gotten.
Yeah,
I think a lot of them have internalized the normalization of you don't take no for an answer.
Yes. Persistence will pay off.
Yes. You'll just wear her down. That's not gross and rapey at all.
Well, speaking of gross and rapey, no, I mean, I don't.
What?
Actually,
it's going to be the complete opposite.
Yeah, it's not gross or rapey.
No, but
really.
now we're going to. That's a horrible segue to talk about a lovely, I think, lovely film.
I don't know if lovely is the word I would
I
use.
think it's a beautiful film, but
It's
it's
a beautiful
It's
film.
beautiful film and heartbreaking.
Yes.
Noah Baumbach's marriage story.
Yeah.
I felt like I got a divorce watching the movie.
Yeah, I have to tell you, I always take notes through films. And
Amateur hour. Oh my
that's
god.
nasty.
I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. I used to take notes.
I still take notes. The thing of it is, I don't need to, but I know I'm going to forget something. And so I like to. So anyway, I was going through my notes just to kind of refresh for this evening, and I was crying reading my notes.
Because you couldn't read them because they were illegible because you wrote them in the dark?
No, because I can always read my notes.
Oh, all right.
I don't actually have that problem.
I see.
Even though I write in the dark. No, I watched it at home, so I was able to read them.
I know.
anyway.
I was just being an
I
asshole.
know. I know. You were just being sassy.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then like I felt the need to go hug my partner, and I was like, I'm so grateful for you, and like crying, and I was a disaster.
Yeah, we were crying through it too.
Oh my God, I was a mess. I was a mess through the film. It's so good. Okay.
This is interesting. I don't think that I cried. I came close a couple of
Ooh,
times.
Interesting.
That last scene didn't get to you?
I was like, the
When-
last scene?
When she gives him their kid for the night and she ties his shoe.
Yeah, and the scene
Oh,
before
no,
that
the scene before where the kid is reading the letter.
Oh,
That,
you're right.
yeah.
I
that's-
can't imagine a more heartbreaking
When
idea.
Adam Driver started crying,
Oh my
realizing that,
God.
oh my God, she just like
Yeah.
it's like whenever a relationship ends and you have that one moment, which maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't, and you remember, oh, that's right, we did care about each other.
Right.
You
But
know?
I think what's so beautiful about, and to back up slightly for our listeners, whether you've seen the film or not, that letter, it starts off the whole film where they're each writing letters to each other, and they're narrating those letters, and then we see the scenes that match when they're in love and they're happy and great, and then Scarlett Johansson's character Nicole does not want to read the letter because it's for in therapy, and then their son is reading it at the end, but we don't ever hear the last line, which is, I will always love him even though it doesn't make sense anymore. And that's just such a gutting line. And yeah, I was just dissolved into a puddle of tears.
And she does love him even though it
She
doesn't
does.
make sense anymore. That's one of those things that I think this movie gets done we can get back to plot and everything in a moment. But I think what it really gets right is sometimes you like stop being with someone not because you hate them, but because you're like, just this isn't.
It's not working.
It's not working. It's not what I signed up for. Whatever your rationale is. Sometimes it's just like.
Well, sometimes love isn't enough.
Yeah,
it's just not.
That is a great way to put it, and I'm being sincere.
Thank you. There's not an ounce of snark.
I feel like I have to let everyone know when I'm being sincere.
Yes.
It's marriage story. It's more like divorce story, but okay.
Right. It is, right. Exactly. It's the dissolution of a marriage, and it's all about their divorce.
But it is kind of fast, and that's what it is. I mean, that's the plot.
That's it.
That is it.
And I have always kind of liked Adam Driver, but I think he's rapidly becoming like one of my favorite contemporary actors.
Oh, without question.
I mean, this guy just has levels different of nuance that he goes to in each performance.
Yes. So
even
much
as
range.
fucking Kylo Ren.
Listen, I think he's perfect as Kylo Ren.
I do,
because
too.
he's so emo, mopey, whiny.
Yes.
He's perfect.
Exactly. I am
Perfect.
on your page.
Yes, I love it. He nails it.
I love him too. He's really good. He's totally underrated, and I just love him the more I see him in things.
Is he really underrated?
Well,
Are
he's
people not on the Adam Driver train?
I think people who watch movies who aren't either making movies or writing about movies that are made are on the Adam Driver train. I don't know if the regular average moviegoer is like, oh, let's go see the new Adam Driver movie.
Yeah, or they're
That's
like,
fair.
well, Adam Driver is just really talented.
Yeah, it's like, oh, Adam Driver, look at those ears.
I mean, I guess I think of a lot of people being introduced to him in Girls, the TV show.
Which is really easy to hate him in.
Oh, he's horrible in it.
Yeah.
But he's not horrible. He's actually fantastic in it. But he plays such a shitty character.
That's what I mean.
Right, exactly. And
I mean, they're all shitty, aren't
well,
they?
Yeah, they really are. They're all the worst people. He's just one of several
Every
that are
horrible
worse.
thing you've ever thought about a millennial takes place in Girls.
Correct.
Yeah.
100%. But yeah, but that was my, introduction to him, as, I'm sure other people that was their introduction to him too. And I was like, oh, that guy just bugs the shit out of me. And then he kept popping up and everything. And I was like, oh, I have to see him again. And I was like, oh, well, he's actually really good. And then the more and more I see him, I'm like, holy shit, there's nothing he can't do. He can do every genre. He can sing. He can act. He's funny. He's dramatic. He can do action. He's great. Yeah, I love him.
Joan and I loved Patterson. Loved. I've seen it, no joke, 15 times.
He's good.
I don't love it, but he's great.
He's amazing.
Yeah, he's great.
I think a big part of it is just to watch him. Yeah. And also I love the final scene where where he just like runs into other people who are just as artistic as he is. I just kind of love that. But what I was going to say is Joan wanted to see Marriage Story because she likes Adam Driver. She loved Patterson. And I could not believe that my wife wanted to watch a story about divorce in which there is a child. And she sat through the whole thing and she thought it was amazing.
Because it is.
Yeah. And I got a hand massage during the movie. So,
Is that a euphemism?
No, it's an actual hand massage.
That's really nice.
Yes, she's very much of the, it's like, let me show you how much I appreciate you by like bending your hand backwards, which my hands are always cramping up. So she does that for me.
Oh, that's sweet.
Yeah.
I actually do that for my partner too.
Hey, there you go. It's the hand massage.
Right.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Massages.
If you have not been on the receiving end of one, find one and then give it to someone because they are amazing and you have no idea. That's right, Evan. Evan over here is like fucking corpsing like you wouldn't believe.
But hand massages are very underrated. Speaking of underrated, they are. But anyway, let's get back to Marriage Story. I mean, the performances in this, there is not one performance in this that doesn't work.
There are people you want to kill.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to just throw one name out there. Julie Haggerty.
Oh, Julie Haggerty is the worst, but she's the best in this.
I mean,
her
performance is amazing.
Her performance is stellar.
But her character
oh my God,
is like,
such an asshole.
I would punch this person in the throat.
An asshole. But that's what I mean. The performances are so good. Yeah. I want to get back to talk about Scarlett Johansson since she's the other co-lead in this. But before we do, I have to say, the reason I was excited to see this film is because the goddess Laura Dern is in this. And within 5 seconds on screen, I'm like, I love this fucking character. Nora is a badass. She's amazing. I want to know. I don't even want to know everything about her. I already know everything about her within the first few moments she's on screen.
I loved her final moment when she was talking about God and Jesus
and
Mary. That was
that
amazing.
monologue. So that's funny that you say that because that's my favorite monologue too, where she's talking about. So in that monologue, she's talking about the expectations of mothers and the gendered expectations and how guys can fuck up and God doesn't even show up and Mary has to be perfect and all women have to be perfect. It's amazing. Laura Dern said in an interview that all of the dialogue was incredible, but that monologue she considered a Christmas gift. Like it was just so unbelievably amazing. She couldn't believe she was getting that monologue because it was so juicy and so good. And it's such, the screenplay is so well written and sharp and funny and aching. It's a great screenplay. It is so good. But even beyond that, the way she delivers it with so much venom and anger and frustration over gender roles. And I think it's really interesting that she's, kind of this vicious lawyer and that she's, going to get, going after, spouses to get everything that her female clients can get because she wants them to have everything. And, and she tells Scarlett Johansson, early on, like, this is an act of hope. You're saying this is what you want. You want a better life for yourself. That's a good thing. And I think it's really interesting that Scarlett Johansson's character realizes and is able to finally vocalize what it is she does want through her interaction with Laura Dern as her lawyer. But yes, and I think Scarlett Johansson is incredible in this too.
She's all right.
Oh, you just think all right.
I think that Scarlett Johansson is, generally speaking, a really good performer. But I think I've seen her give better performances. I can't think of anything that I would say that wasn't a good choice. Nothing so specific. But I think part of it is I was so enamored not of Adam Driver's character because his character is a little on the douchey side.
Oh, totally.
But of his performance is so amazing that it's kind of like.
Do you feel like it overshadows hers?
I mean, I don't know if overshadows is right. I think he also gets more screen time. I'm not entirely sure, but I think he does.
Yeah, I think he does too.
And she also doesn't have a moment like the slicing yourself accidentally in the arm moment like he has, which is just kind of one of the most amazing things I think I've ever seen.
That scene was nuts
like
and hilarious and awful and creepy.
He's putting a Band-Aid on it like that's going to do the trick. It's like, no, dude, you need to get stitches for that shit.
And I like how he's like grabbing the paper towel.
And he puts his foot on the counter to like, because it's like, it's horrifying and hilarious at the same time. And then when his kid comes in and he instinctively rolls over to like not show him his bleeding arm because he doesn't want his kid to lose his mind.
Freak out, yeah.
And it's just like, oh my God, I've never injured myself like that in front of Henry. But like the whole thing with the leg, the knee, we don't need to get into it, listeners, but I'm having a knee problem right now. But like, I was like walking up the stairs tonight to put Henry in bed, and I was like, and he's like, "What's wrong?" I'm like, "Oh, nothing. I just stepped the wrong way." Because then he'll stop and be like, "Oh, can I kiss it and make it better?" Which is very sweet, but you're on the stairs and it's 4 years old, and you don't want him to fall down the stairs. It's a whole thing.
That's very sweet.
So the only thing I will say about this that I'm just kind of like, I mean, this is probably going to be on my top 10 list, but one of the things that I think about marriage generally. And I think this holds for this movie, even though you're getting both sides of the story. You really don't know what goes on in someone else's marriage, even when it's being presented to you on screen.
No, of course not.
So it's kind of like, what else are we not? Like, I would have liked to, he had the affair, but they were already separated. But does that make it okay? And I'm not saying yes or no.
No, you're just raising the question.
I'm raising the question.
Okay.
He's like, I was already on the sofa when that happened, and then I was thinking, okay, you were on the sofa, but I'm sure there were nights that you didn't stay at home. So, like, what was your wife thinking you were doing?
Right.
I mean, did you say, "Oh, I slept over at gym"? I mean, what?
Well, that's why you should have conversations about this.
Yeah.
And this brings me to the point that I want to talk about, which is one of my favorite things about this film. The cinematography and mise en scène in this film are absolutely phenomenal. And Robbie Ryan does the cinematography, and he does beautiful cinematography in American Honey and The Favorite and Slow West. And
Slow West is beautiful.
So I absolutely Slow West is beautiful, but so is American Honey. And the fact that the cinematography in that simultaneously shows the expansiveness and hope of youth while also the oppressiveness of poverty simultaneously is incredible visually. Oh my God. So anyway, what I loved about this particularly is that every single scene, except perhaps the scenes in the beginning, the montage when they're happy, every single scene, they are separated. They're either separated by a stair banister. They're separated by a door. They're separated by a gate to her new home. They're even at the very end of the film, they're separated by Henry, their son.
Yeah.
And they're each hugging him, which shows their connection as a family still. But they're constantly separated, and just when they're on the subway together silently, they're off in their own worlds, and you can see all the space between them. And it's just, there's almost always so much space, and there's always something visually, separating them. And it just was incredible to kind of see that narrative, but also see it symbolically reinforced visually on screen too. It just was beautiful.
I hadn't thought about the separation, but I did. One of the things that stuck out to me was when he went over to her home, her new house, and the gate was stuck.
Yes.
And then they're closing the gate together because the electricity is out, and like they look at each other, and you're like, oh, and the literal wall is going between us. So,
exactly.
But yeah, I hadn't really thought about that. But you're absolutely right.
Well, thank you.
Evan, as a newly married person.
Ooh.
Let's hear the newly married person's take.
Yeah, this movie wrecked me. It was very difficult to watch. I can't ever imagine having the level of venom and vitriol that they have for each other, especially in that one kind of climactic yelling match argument scene. That was really fucking hard to watch. I can't imagine ever being that angry at my wife, or like at that point where, first of all, divorced, but second of all, being angry enough to say those kinds of hurtful things that they say to each other. I mean, like when Adam Driver pretty much ends it with like saying he wishes she was dead
every day.
I was like, good God. Like that is bad.
Yeah.
That is really bad.
I guess you guys don't have a lot of divorced friends, is what I'm going to say.
No. I mean, yeah, and just seeing how the lawyers kind of do slimy things to, like, paint the other person in such a negative light, like the courtroom scene. It's
that
just
courtroom
so gross.
scene is unreal.
It's just so gross the way they go back and forth, just, like, needling each other and saying nasty things. And, like, you could tell that both, you know, Scarlett Johansson and Adam Driver's characters are just so uncomfortable with the whole thing, but, like, they feel like they have to stand their ground and fight, so they have these, like, attorneys doing battle for them.
Adam Driver even says later, he's like, I needed my own asshole, which is why he hires the Ray Liotta character. He initially he goes to see Ray Liotta at first, and he's like, I don't want to fucking be horrible. So then he hires sweet Alan Alda.
Oh, I love Alan Alda.
He's so great in this.
Who is great. I'm not really an Alan Alda fan. I don't dislike him, but this I thought he was amazing.
He's fantastic.
And also just like absolutely the right kind of mindset you want, but the wrong lawyer.
100%.
So,
well, it's interesting speaking about the lawyers. Noah Baumbach said in an interview that he wanted big personalities. Like, he wanted people that you knew, that you'd recognize. He's like, Alan Alda, you've seen him in a million things. You know, he comes with, kind of. He didn't say preconceived notions, but he kind of comes with, like, you already like, oh,
he's Alan Alda,
yeah, he's great. And, like, same with Ray Liotta, like, seems like, he's, hard nosed and, not going to take any bullshit.
Yeah, and that line about, starting in the end will end up somewhere between reasonable and crazy.
Right.
Yeah.
That was a clip that I saw in the trailer for the movie, and I thought, okay, it's kind of a smarmy kind of one-off line, but then in the scene, I just thought it was so fantastic.
I mean, I don't think I've seen Ray Liotta this good in decades. Like,
oh yeah, he's amazing.
Great. Yeah, he
He's
makes the most of his small
lucid.
role.
It must be that
too.
Chantix that helped him.
Yeah, I don't know. The last time I saw Ray Liotta be this great, and you guys are going to be like, "What?" And I'd hate Joe Carnahan.
You're going to say Narc.
Yeah, Narc. He's fucking amazing in Narc.
I haven't seen that recently enough to say either way.
I've never seen it, so I can't.
Well, it's one of those movies where a filmmaker you don't like, it's like he had a moment of clarity for all 9 months or however long it took him to write the script, and then he had a moment of clarity every day he was shooting. It's like, wow, you didn't fuck this up, and then you went and made The Gray. So, all right,
All right, but back to Marriage Story. Evan, I think you bring up a really good point about the lawyers. And it's funny because I had kind of a different take on the lawyers. As uncomfortable as their scenes are in, the deposition and in the courtroom, I saw it I don't know, I kind of saw it differently. Like, I was like, well, they're just doing their jobs. But two, their whole job, and this comes up in the film in the dialogue, but also their whole job is to present their client's side of the story.
Oh, totally.
And
they're doing their jobs.
Right. And so
for sure. They have to.
Right. 100%. And so it is awful, but also I was kind of like, oh, I'm not bothered by this. And I think if it was in the hands of a lesser writer, filmmaker, I might have been way more bothered by it. But somehow here I was like, oh, they're kind of not vilified. I'm kind of okay with what's happening, even though it's awful. And
I think it's just naturally ugly business when you have
100%.
to, when you're not in agreement, when you can't kind of take the path of least resistance, the kind of Alan Alda approach. Because I think most lawyers, when it comes to divorce, try to go that route and say, like, let's not fight this and drag it out. It's going to be way more expensive. Right. Let's just kind of work things out and try to meet in the middle.
Like, work with a mediator, try to come to a resolution. Yeah.
So, I know that the lawyers are doing their jobs, but it's icky business.
Yeah.
When you get down to it.
100%. But I just liked the way it was depicted. I liked how we see the meetings with each of them, and we see each of their different approaches. Like, Laura Dern's is so like, here, I'm going to give you tea and cookies and hugs, and it's like warm colors. And then we see Ray Liotta's, and it's all very stark colors. And then we see Alan Alda's, and it's like fluorescent lighting and kind of awful, even though he has a cat who's lovely. But
also,
anyway,
Ray Liotta's office looks like a holdover from the late 70s in a weird way.
It very much does. Yeah, but I kind of liked how we're seeing, the approaches. And, it's interesting that Adam Driver does have more screen time, but every time I thought, oh, this film's being too sympathetic to him, something would happen where we'd see Scarlett Johansson's perspective. And I'm like, no, she's totally right. Good for her. And
Yeah. Well, I mean, you made a point earlier about, I think you said something to the effect of like, it would have been better if one of the characters had communicated something to the other character. And I think ultimately that's one of the biggest problems in their marriage is that
100%.
didn't communicate enough with each other.
Right.
And I feel like, yes, we know that Adam Driver's character is self-centered and oblivious and kind of in his own world, but I feel like if they had had some of these conversations more pointedly, where it was more obvious that Scarlett Johansson wasn't happy with those circumstances, maybe things would have been different, but I don't know. Because it feels like some of this is like she's had all this kind of private agony that she hasn't been more explicitly pointed in saying like I disagree about this or I didn't want this. Like he is portrayed as oblivious, like he doesn't know or he doesn't realize or he's just shitty and like doesn't put two and two together, whatever you want to say. But it just sucks. It's like, I don't know, maybe if this was a more pointed conversation, things might not have gotten to this point.
See, and that's so interesting because I completely disagree. I think what I got from the film is that she has been mentioning this all along. She's been saying, hey, I don't want to be here. I want to be in LA. Hey, I want to direct. Hey, I want to focus on my career. Hey, I want to do this. And he's just placating her like, oh, no, baby, we're going to deal with that later. Oh, no, we're going to do this now. And so I got the sense that she has been very pointed about this, but he's just constantly silencing her and not taking her feelings into a consideration at all.
Now here, I fall in the middle.
Yeah, see, okay.
Because I think in her mind, she probably has. And in his mind, he's heard none of this. And it probably is somewhere in the middle where he is oblivious and also kind of a dick. And she is also kind of like, I told him, but I don't want to seem like I'm being a dick about it. And this goes back to what I was saying about like, who knows what actually goes on in a marriage? You know, it's just like, maybe she really did, but that's not maybe she really did say, no, you said we're moving to LA, and so we're moving to LA. And he was like, bah. But Noah Baumbach didn't focus on that. So
I just feel like in a lot of the ways that she recounted the stories, there was almost like an uncertainty in that, like, I wasn't sure based on the way she was telling the story if she was as clear at the time or if it was like more ambiguous conversations. I feel like when she's discussing it with the lawyer, it's mentioned in ways that are kind of roundabout, but when Laura Dern takes control of the conversation, then she's like, oh no, you did talk about this. You did have this. Like, it's more clear for the purposes of like the argument and like the legal proceedings, but when it's being recounted in some instances, it doesn't feel like that's kind of where I was coming from. I feel like she wasn't necessarily, I don't know. You know what I mean? Like she's kind of talking around it in some ways. And
you feel like she's not as decisive when she's saying like, no, this was my problem and this was that. Yeah.
Well, I think part of it is she's discovering what her problems were. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like as she's telling the story, she's like, no, I really did feel that way.
Right. Exactly.
And, you know, and...
Well, she says that really early on to Julie Haggerty as her mother. She's like, I can't just go from doing what Charlie wanted to do to doing what you want to do. And she didn't feel like she had her own voice or her own identity. And she was so overwhelmed and enamored with him that, you know, he was so brilliant in listening to her that she was like, oh my God, I can't believe he's so amazing in listening to me. So yeah, I think, Evan, you're bringing up really good points. And Dave, you too. I think you're bringing up really good points that it probably is. The truth is somewhere in the middle. But yeah, I just got really the sense that not that he's like, you know, an asshole who's like totally disregarding her feelings, but just that he's centering himself and not centering her ever. And that the reason she sounded, and what I interpreted from why she sounds so unsure and uncertain when she's talking to Laura Dern isn't that she's not certain per se about her feelings, but more kind of like that she second guesses because society places these unbelievably unrealistic expectations on women constantly. And a lot of times those expectations and, you know, dudes will make you second guess yourself and make you think, oh, well, maybe I am being an asshole, or maybe, you know, we should do this. And so that's kind of what I got taking away from it, was that it was more kind of these expectations and his career and his, you know, needs and whatnot that were making her be like, oh, well, maybe that's why I feel this way. So anyway.
Man, I really want to go for the easy, cheap joke and ask, are you sure? But I'm not going to do that.
I am sure. I sure am sure. Yeah, I thought this was absolutely incredible. And I also think it's really interesting how the film came about, because this is very clearly a personal film for Noah Baumbach, since he got divorced from Jennifer Jason Leigh, and this came about after their divorce. But I also think it's interesting because the reason that he did this film was he wanted to work with Adam Driver again, because they've worked together like 4 times before. And he'd also worked with Scarlett Johansson and wanted to work with her. And of like the cast that was talking, because Laura Dern was in on this conversation too, and she had just gone through her divorce, and everyone was divorced or had been divorced except for Adam Driver. And it's just so...
Who is still married.
Yeah, he's still married. And then Noah Baumbach went ahead and he started talking to his friends who were going through divorces and their friends. And then he interviewed judges and lawyers and mediators to kind of get all these perspectives. And I really feel like in an interview I read with him, either at Deadline or the LA Times, he was talking about how this is not a true film for him, even though he keeps getting asked like, oh, is this about your marriage to Jennifer Jason Leigh? And he's like, no, it's not true. It's fictitious. But he says that he's always trying to look for cinematic truth. But I still can't shake the feeling that he's mining all of this pain and just pouring it on screen. And I just thought it was incredible. Very raw, very honest and brutal.
Yeah. I'm with you. Yeah, I don't know anything about... I know that he was married to Jennifer Jason Leigh and that they are split up not long after he met Greta Gerwig, interestingly.
Correct. Although they both say that...
they all do.
Yeah,
yes.
they all do.
Everybody
but they lived in New York, and then Jennifer Jason Leigh went back and lived in L.A.
Yeah.
Very, very similarly to what happens.
And I don't want to fucking guess who knows what happened in their marriage. But it emotionally felt very true to me, though. So
very much so.
That was very cool.
Yep.
For lack of a better word.
So I have a question for you guys. Do you find the ending heartbreaking or hopeful or both?
I found the ending to be this is how it is. Like, she still cares enough about him and her son more, probably. But you know what? He didn't get to have Thanksgiving, the Halloween that he wanted to have with Henry last year. Henry's clearly had a great time with him. Henry's tired. He's already let's just let Henry go home with Dad. Mm-hmm. And, because I want Henry to be happy, and then that makes Dad happy, and then everybody's happy as they can be.
Yeah.
And I'll also tie your shoe just because you're a fucking idiot who doesn't know your shoe's untied. Because I know you well enough to know you don't know your shoe's untied. Right. And you never know your shoe's untied. Mm-hmm. Which is all unspoken, but it's all there. Right.
And that's what's incredible, is that it is all unspoken, and you don't need to have any kind of exposition on that, which is beautiful.
But I supplied it anyway.
I love that you did. Yeah. Evan, what do you think?
Heartbreaking. It's absolutely heartbreaking. The idea that Adam Driver finally gets to read those words that she wrote, these really lovely things about him, and just to have to sit there with the fact that it's over, and that there was so much love there, and that he's lost it for good, and he can't have it, and things can never be the way that they were before. That fucking breaks my heart. Especially, I mean, in the context of he's there, and her new boyfriend is there and around, and it's just I feel like there's an extra level of heartbreak to that, because I got the sense that he was a little bit surprised that the guy was there. Yeah. He wasn't necessarily expecting to walk into that, so I have to live there and sit with those feelings, and then sit with her being with somebody new, being happy. It's just
well, and her new boyfriend's not even just there, but he's playing laser tag with their son and her mom. So,
right, and they're doing a group costume together, and it's just it's rough.
And then the boyfriend is such a nice guy. He's like, well, you can be George Martin.
I know, he's so nice. Well, I mean, yeah, so it's interesting. I've been thinking about this, and not that it necessarily matters if it's happy or not, of course, because it can be a multitude of things. Mm-hmm. But I kept thinking for Scarlett Johansson, it seems really happy. She's, in LA, she has her son, she's directing, which is something she always wanted to do. Mm-hmm. I'm yay, she's got a new boyfriend, great for her. but everything kind of has this, pallor of pain and regret, and it's just so aching. And it's like, if only she had read that letter before they got divorced, maybe things would have different. Or as she says to Laura Dern, she's like, if only when I got the gig on the TV show, if my husband hadn't made fun of it, if he'd just hugged me and said, "Good job, honey, I want to support you," rather than making fun of it and mocking it for being a TV show, she's like, we'd still be married. And it's like, you think about those things, like, what are the things you wish you hadn't said? What are the things you wish you could take back? And, what if you would just, hugged your partner instead of, yelling at them or getting upset or whatever it may be. And yeah.
I found her new life, and I'll not talk much more, I promise. I found her new life, like, during the Halloween thing. I found a lot of ambivalence there.
Oh,
yeah.
Interesting.
Like a lot of like, all right, I got the Emmy nomination, and I got the
It's kind of like a half-hearted kiss when she goes in to kiss her new boyfriend.
Yeah, and
it
I got
doesn't
the
necessarily seem like it's something that's permanent per se. It's just kind of like feels right for the moment.
Right. Maybe that, but maybe also just like,
or maybe because Adam Driver's there. She doesn't want
there's that, but also just kind of like,
know.
did I want to jump into a relationship this soon?
Oh,
That's what I was thinking. It's like, having been the kind of person who's like breaks up with X on Friday and then makes Y the
on
following
Saturday?
Friday. Yeah,
Oh.
it's like, well, let's take a little time here.
Right.
So Megan,
yes.
I guess I was a little ambiguous. Heartbreaking, hopeful. Where did you? Kind
Oh,
of land
sorry,
in that?
I know I didn't say. I'm torn because I found her life hopeful because I was like, oh, good for her. She didn't have what she wanted for so long, and now she does. And I guess I didn't see her new life quite as ambivalent. I guess I took it a little more at face value. That I was like, yay for her. And yay that they can co-parent and be lovely to each other after, being so vitriolic with each other.
Yeah.
And yeah, but it's also incredibly heartbreaking. Like, I could not stop crying. Like, it was so beautifully executed. And I know I keep saying the word beautiful, I'm overusing it, but it really it struck so many nerves and just on so many levels of emotion.
I think
but yeah, it was heartbreaking.
Beautiful is totally appropriate if it makes you feel any better.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I always appreciate the validation.
You and me both.
Woohoo!
Right. Yeah. Anybody else have anything to say about the old marriage story?
No, nothing else about Mirage story.
Right.
Just that it's incredible and everyone should
see it, even if
amazing.
you don't like serious movies. There are people out there like that.
I was going to say, who doesn't like serious movies? But
I'm not getting into it.
That's a conversation for another time.
Yeah.
All right. So that's this week's episode of Spoiler Piece Theater, where we talked about Marriage Story and the Montreal International Documentary Festival.
Rencontre internationale du documentaire de Montréal.
Oui.
Yes.
C'est vrai.
Yes. Some great films. Glad that I went again. And thank you to the festival for having me.
Wonderful.
But skip Stray Dogs.
No, Space Dogs.
Space Dogs.
And Los Reyes. Yeah, no.
Oh, skip Los Reyes too? Okay. Got it.
Well, I mean, come on. It's difficult for animal. If you
Well,
love
yeah.
animals in any way, shape, or form, do not
You're
see
like, skip
either
it.
of those.
Okay. There we go. Got it. But definitely see all the rest and Marriage Story. Thank you, everyone, for listening to this week's episode of Spoiler Piece Theater. And Dave, why don't you tell us where
we can find
can
the
be
podcast?
found,
Oh,
yes.
yeah. All kinds of places. Oh, places.
Oh, places.
Oh, apostrophe places?
Yes. Oh, places.
Excellent.
Oh, the places you can listen to us.
Anywhere you can find a podcast, you can find us. Even on Spotify, goddammit. Because I got the email from them the other week. So,
and YouTube.
And YouTube. That's right. YouTube and the iTunes and the whatever. So you can find us there. Please rate us. Give us the highest rating you can and be like, Dave's so sexy in your comments. Dave runs marathons.
It's Rex Manning Day all over again.
Don't write that. You probably don't know what I look like. But anyway, yeah. So like us, rate us, all that stuff. If you wanted to get in touch with the show for any reason, to tell us how much you like us and want to rate us, you can send us an email, spoilerpiece@gmail.com. You could go to our website, spoilerpiece.com, and you could get in touch with us through that. You could
Follow us on Twitter.
You can follow us on Twitter at SpoilerPiece. You could give us a call.
862-21-PEACE.
You could leave us a voicemail, and we will listen to it and be like, tee-hee, that's great. Unless you tell me to,
and we'll definitely
suck a tailpipe or something like that, in which case
ouch.
I won't go tee-hee.
And we'll definitely say tee-hee.
Yes, that is one of my things. And also, if you are a big, huge fan, or if you just feel like you want to do like a Good Samaritan kind of thing, you can throw us a few bones via patreon.com/spoilerpiece. And as a sort of thank you for that, you will get exclusive audio. And you can, if you are
for as low as $5 a month.
For as low as $5 a month. For a little bit more, you can tell us which movies we have to watch, which someone has finally done, even though several of you are in that tier. So, but someone's like, you're watching this. And we're like, all right, we're watching it. So that's happening next month. This week, we have the results of our poll, which is the Thanksgiving movies. And so we talk about what's cooking and the ice storm.
Since we had a tie in the poll.
We had a tie in the poll.
So that's the kind of stuff you get. You get 2 movies for the price of 1.
That's right. And if you're not a patron, you're missing out on this amazing exclusive content.
You're missing out on Thanksgiving movies that we just shit all over. So
you want to listen to that.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's that. And I guess I'll throw it back to Megan, and you can tell us where we can find you and all that stuff.
Ooh, thank you. Well, my name is Megan Kearns. I am a freelance writer and film critic, editor of Bitch Flicks, and member of BOFCA, Boston Online Film Critics Association. And you can find me on Twitter at OpinionSWorld.
And my name's Dave Riedel. I write for Salt Lake City Weekly, Orlando Weekly. I'm a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd as Dave Sees Movies.
And my name is Evan Crean. I am editor for The Independent. I'm co-chair of BOFCA and co-author of your 80s Movie Guide to Better Living. And you can follow me on Twitter and on Letterboxd as Real Recon.
Hope you had a happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving, folks.
Bye.
Thanks so much. Bye.